So I early on found out that there was some major problems with our system. Typically, most of us don't wake up until we've been confronted ourselves, unfortunately. So therefore, I started seeing there was a problem. I started digging into it and I started studying. I became a constitutional scholar and is specializing in the common law, which is actually biblical law that has come across to us. Basically, this is what I'm going to talk about. And I was asked, because in the rally at Brazos County, I was talking about getting the word out, which is what we're all here to do, is try to get more people involved. The greater our numbers, the better we're going to do. And in this talk, I mentioned my constitutional traffic stop. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit here just to kind of give you an idea about this too. Every one of us has run into problems with, getting pulled over and, the frustrations that go along with behind that. But in this meeting, I mentioned it, and then I started getting people requesting me constantly, saying, hey, wait a minute, tell me more about this constitutional traffic stop. So I said, okay, not a problem. Let me go ahead and send this to you. Now, to tell you how this got honed out is actually through my own experience, my own practice, and what I used in this. I ran a newsletter called Awaken America that it was on constitutional law, covering every topic you could think about that deals with the common law. And with it, I put out a newsletter called Awaken America. I just shut it down last year. Basically, I had 390,000 people getting this newsletter once a month, and it was enormous. In this process, I honed down this constitutional traffic stop, which I'm going to do here in a minute, because I'm going to talk quite a bit in a bit on case sites and things like this that back up our right to travel. But first of all, like I said, this constitutional traffic stop is so interesting in the way that it flows. Okay, so you'll find out about that, and it becomes pretty fun. And it'll break up this, so you're not just listening to, well, this case site and that case site. So it will start off with that. Now, most of us take for granted the ability to just load up the family car, put your family in there, go on vacations, travel anywhere you want to, unless you see those flashing lights behind you. Then all of a sudden, everything comes to a screeching halt. You're stuck there, you're intimidated, you have these problems taking place with you. Now, we've always held our right to travel as being a sacred right that we've had. The West was actually romanticized for their ability to just pick up and jump on your horse and go any place that you wanted to go. Well, that's exactly what we still feel about the right to travel. And so this is one of those topics, when I'm talking about spreading the word, that you can mention to your coworkers, your neighbors, your family, and they understand that. They'll say, yeah, I just paid, I got a ticket for speeding down this road, and I just had to fork over all this money, went through this whole hassle, the whole bit, going into court possibly, all the different types of things that you have to go about through this. So I know that Rice has been teaching in this area, and there are different methods, and we're going to go ahead and step into that here in just a minute. But what we want to do is prevent them from ever getting you to that stage. Okay? And anything that we do, we want to go ahead and stop them before they get into their processes. Okay? Wherever you can avoid getting into that system, the better off you are. Okay? Now, there's a spiritual aspect to the right to travel too I touch on. We can go back to the time of Moses, and I will touch on this period a couple of times in this talk, because if you think about it, with divine intervention, he was able to get the Israelites out of Egypt and get them the right to travel outside of that country. So see, it actually goes back to then. We can also go back to the time of Christ. And Christ, if you'll notice, throughout the New Testament, talks about him and his disciples traveling to and from Galilee. You'll see it in there regularly. Well, what most people don't recognize is that each time they did that, you look right before it, and he had the Sanhedrin, or he had the Romans after him. And there's the disciples. They're causing some stir, and so they go moving on. Well, what most people do not realize is they were actually moving out of Herod's jurisdiction, because his jurisdiction actually stopped 40 miles south of Nazareth before you got into the Sea of Galilee. So they actually had this right to travel, to move out of there and getting away out of the jurisdiction, which is what we're trying to do, get out of the jurisdiction of the system that out here that is so corrupt. Now, as far back as the Magna Carta, and you will see me reading every so often, the right to travel was recognized, and it read, "It shall be lawful to any person for the future to go out of our kingdom and to return safely and securely by land or water, saving his allegiance to us, unless it be in time of war, for some short space, for the common good of the kingdom, accepting prisoners and outlaws according to the laws of the land and of the people of the nation at war against us, and merchants who shall be treated as said above." Now, the only time it seems that the government restricted their travel was when they considered them to be enemy combatants. Now, since the Patriot Act, we also recognize that every single one of us with any kind of a violation of a law, misdemeanor or otherwise, we can be considered enemy combatants. So this is the system that is trying to clamp down on us for this. And as far back as the Magna Carta, we were granted that right. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, interestingly enough, it actually had a specific mention of the right to travel, which allowed for free ingress and regress to and from any other state. Now, when the Constitution was written, and I can go into this in a full Constitution class I give, it takes 8 hours to go through the class, but I go into massive detail. But when the Constitution was written, they did not include it specifically. They did not enumerate it. However, it's not in one of the 24 rights mentioned, enumerated in the Bill of Rights, but it is included in the Ninth Amendment, okay? So therefore, we have to go back there. Now, there's a word, and I'm going to go into this here further in a minute, but there's a word for those restricted from traveling where they desire, but also must check in or get permission from authorities before traveling. The word is slaves. So we are slaves as long as we have to follow this guideline. We can even go back to Nazi Germany and what happened with that, and show me your papers, all this kind of stuff, okay? Now, to continue, I'm going to start off this one just to kind of get us lightened up a little bit. I'm going to have a couple of questions for you. How many people in this room, if you can just show me your hands, have been pulled over for a traffic stop? Okay, virtually everybody. Now, I would say everybody. Somebody just didn't want to show up their hand. The second one I want to ask you is this. Have you ever been arrested at a traffic stop? Come on now, come on now. Okay. Have you ever had your car impounded at a traffic stop? Okay, several people here. Okay, then we can say, have you ever, okay, unless you were drinking at the time, God forbid, but if you were drinking at the time, I bet it was a nerve-wracking experience at that time. Always is. You end up leaving there and you're just shaking, you know, what just happened here, blah, 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 or you're angry and you vent out this all over the place, okay? Now, I don't have to tell the group that the laws that are currently stated in America right now bear a very little resemblance to constitutional law. All of the rights, with the exception of one, and that one is iffy, okay, have been infringed upon little by little, incrementally, ever since the Civil War, okay? Now, at the time, like I said, I go into this in great detail, but like I said, the right to travel is sitting in the unenumerated rights in the Ninth Amendment, which reads, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now, these rights also, now this is only a very limited number, but the right to marry who you want. These also give you the right to work where you want without licenses or permits. As long as you're qualified for a position, you can hold it. So I don't care if you practice law, you don't have to be a member of the Bar Association. If you can practice medicine, you know what you're doing, and you can show that and prove that you can do that, you can hold that position without license or permits. And this is a guarantee under the Constitution. These are just a couple of things. For those who really want to know the real truth, right after the Civil War, what they did with the 14th Amendment is make a complete set, a weak copy of the enumerated unalienable rights that came from our Declaration of Independence, okay? Now, in the Declaration of Independence, we were given unalienable rights by our Creator. If we just follow the chronology, we can see this. So the first part, there's 3 documents in the organic law of the United States, and that is the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights was those unalienable rights recognized by everyone in this country at that time, the 13 original colonies, and they were mandated that they put in this Bill of Rights or they would not sign off on the Constitution. So we go back that far, we recognize that was what these were. After the 14th Amendment, we all of a sudden had these civil rights or human rights. You'll hear them mentioned both ways. I actually have a lot of fun when somebody first says to me, oh, I'm a civil rights activist. And I'm going, why would you want to do that? And they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm saying civil rights are privileges legislated and given to you that can be taken away. So they're privileges and not rights. All rights are based on property. All rights are based on property. You have a right to your life. So therefore, that is an unalienable right that they cannot take from you. You have the right to speak to what you want to, and I'm going to go into that a little bit further too. You have the rights to do anything that you want to do as long as you don't harm someone else or their property. That's the maximum of the common law where this came from. Now, I'm going to make this real clear. We need to follow that maximum of law in anything we do. So this constitutional traffic stop I'm talking about, if you run into somebody's car, you've caused damage to their vehicle, you've damaged their property, then this does not apply. If you've performed a hit and run, same thing. Okay? If you've hurt someone or their property, then that maximum of the common law still holds. Okay? The common law is a hard mistress, I've heard it said. Okay? The problem is that most of us, and I hate to say it, but you know, the generation that came before me and the generation that's coming after me have let this slide. We've let this slide. We don't have the accountability and responsibility that we used to have. 150 years ago, had you destroyed someone's wagon in the process, you would have had to pay for it. You know, whatever it took, you would have to go ahead and say, okay, I'll fix it. And that was your responsibility. And they could deal with that situation. The same thing holds now. We've just got to educate people that we need to be more responsible and accountable in these processes. Okay? Now, before I get to this fun part about this, I'm going to tell you that the method I advocate is very simple. It is not the paper shuffling. It's not all of this kind of stuff that comes about, for instance, through the redemption process. The redemption process and everything that's involved with it, is legally and technically correct. It is. I won't dispute that at all. However, there has been some changes, and most of the people in this room probably know this, is that we learned exactly who we were. We know who that is. And we know what we need to do in order to try to regain that. We don't have the numbers to make the big difference that we really need to make, you know, the system change internally. When most people bring up these events now, I don't know if y'all run into this situation, but I would bet some of these people in this room have, as you go into the situation, either they won't listen to you or they want to get you in and out of there as quick as possible. The reason is they don't want you, anybody in that audience, anybody that might hear it, to actually hear what you're doing, because they don't want everybody trying to do this. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but 3 years ago, every judge in the United States and every prosecutor in the United States is now required to go to classes twice a year to fight us, anybody coming in them fighting on redemption grounds. They are taught now how to circumvent us. Now, when we win, and we do win on occasion, we win some of these battles. When we win them, typically the reason is that they goof up. Okay? They'll make a mistake, they'll misspeak, they'll violate their own procedure, and they end up having to go ahead and just dismiss it, just move it on, you know, move on past it. Okay? The times that it does work is when they follow it and they don't know how to go around it. They haven't educated themselves, so they go, oh, I should have remembered that class I just took. You know, so they have to turn back around, they have to move it on out of there, and they try to do it as quickly as possible to get you out of that court. Now, under this system, and I'm going to have to ask for a volunteer. You want to help me out here in a minute? Okay, this constitutional traffic stop is very simple. I say simple, you have to know certain things very well. You need to be able to go ahead and go through this, you know, without having to think about it. Another thing is that you have to know it well enough that you don't let them break the flow. They've got specific strategic, you know, procedural guidelines of what they have to do in a traffic stop. This follows along those guidelines. You will occasionally find a real jerk out there. There's no doubt. There's some just, to use the term loosely, redneck cop that pulls you over and he's